All right, and we'll start. So hi, everyone. Welcome to JOWMA's Premed, third Premed webinar series. The topic today is work-life balance. I feel like this topic has been simmering on our chat for so long, and there have been so many questions shot at me and at other people on this topic. So I'm really happy that we're finally giving it, the entire session that it deserves. I see a couple of new names, so I'll introduce myself. My name is Efrat Brook. I'm a fourth-year medical student at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai in New York City. I'm also a former high school teacher and former MCAT content creator for Khan Academy. I'm the chair of JOWMA Premed, where our goal is to provide resources, support, and information to Premed students starting all the way from high school throughout your entire Premed journey. If you're not yet a JOWMA member, please join. We would love to have you. I have with me today two amazing, wonderful co-hosts, Dr. Jacqueline Segelnik and Dr. Jessica Goldman, who took the time to be here today. They are going to introduce themselves in a minute. I just want to give you all an outline of what the session is going to look like. We'll start with some brief introductions. After that, I'm going to give a brief 10 tops 15-minute presentation on our topic. We'll take questions on the presentation after that. And then the entire second half of this session will be dedicated to answering the questions that you all submitted on the Google Doc. And those questions will be answered by Dr. Segelnik and Dr. Goldman. So that's as far as the outline of the session. I want to jumpstart our discussion with sharing, and Dr. Segelnik and Dr. Goldman will also share this when they introduce themselves. I just want to share, what my life priorities looked like outside of medicine when I was in medical school, and an example of one thing I felt like I had to kind of put on the back burner or put on hold during medical school. So I started medical school in the second half of my 20s. I was already married at the time. I had my first daughter between the first and second year of medical school. I had my second daughter during what would have been my consecutive fourth year, but my academic third year. And I'll explain during our presentation what I mean by that. And I guess if I had to give an example of something that I put on hold or put on the back burner during medical school, I would say that my husband and I used to really love hosting these large Shabbos meals and large, parties in our house and onags and all these sorts of things with just people milling in and out of our apartment a lot, especially on weekends. But that sort of got put on the back burner for medical school. And I have to say, we have not been as big of hosts since medical school started. So that is my little intro. Dr. Segelnik, it would be great if you can introduce yourselves and share also what your kind of life looked like during medical school outside of medicine, and what you felt like you maybe had to put on hold for medical school.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Jacqueline Segelnik. So a little background, I went to Hafter High School, and then I went to Queens for college, and then NYT School of Osteopathic Medicine for medical school. I had my first child, she is now almost 3, between my third and fourth year, and I am currently a second-year resident in family medicine on Long Island and pregnant with my second child. So hopefully that all goes well. And something, I started med school married. We got married 3 weeks before I started medical school. And something that I felt that I kind of had to put on the back burner also was going out for Shabbat. Shabbat was my day of rest always, but I didn't use it to go hang out with friends or, host or go out to meals. It was more of my day of rest from the hectic life of med school.
Thank you, Dr. Segelnik. Thanks so much. Dr. Goldman, if you can introduce yourselves also and share that little tidbit.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Goldman. So nice to be here and speak to you all. So just as a background about myself, I'm originally from New Jersey. I went to Ramaz Upper School in Manhattan for high school. Then for college, I went to Johns Hopkins. I was a Near Eastern Studies major and a Jewish Studies minor. Then I proceeded to go to Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School. I graduated in 2017. After that, I did a preliminary year in internal medicine at North Shore and Long Island Jewish Medical Center, basically Hofstra, Northwell School of Medicine, affiliated hospitals. And now I'm presently at Montefiore Medical Center. I'm in my 3rd year of radiology residency. So just like a little bit of a background about my personal life at the time. So I actually only recently got married this past summer, and I spent the bulk of my medical school, my social life, at least in medical school, dating when I had the free time. So I think that's a little bit more unique, but fortunately, I finally met my husband and got married this past summer, like I said. Something that I felt like I had to put on the back burner is my Jewish studies. So I went to Jewish day school my whole life. And, even when I was in college, I felt that it was a big enough priority to me that I chose to minor in Jewish studies. But, as a medical student, I felt that that was something that I had to put on the back burner, still maintaining my religious observance, but just, not really being as proactive with actually studying Jewish studies. That's all I got.
Thank you. Thanks. So we'll move on to the presentation. I'm gonna share my screen. Give me a moment. And I promise this is not gonna be long because I don't like long presentations. I don't like sitting through them, so I don't give them. All right, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. Give me a second to get Zoom out of my way. Okay, so I introduced myself. We can skip this. Okay. So how time consuming is medical school? You're gonna find a lot of variable answers. People have different opinions about this, but I thought I'd give you a little bit of a structure so that you can, kind of get a sense for yourself. So the first 2 years of medical school are basically just studying, or mostly studying. You might have some clinical stuff thrown in, but it's not prioritized. After those first 2 years, you take the first of a series of 3 board exams that every medical student who wants a license in the US has to take. After that, you have your 3rd year of medical school, which I think for most people is the hardest year, definitely the most time-consuming year, because you have clerkships, which means you're in the hospital kind of doing things at least 9 to 5, sometimes more. But then you also have at the end of each of those clerkships an exam. So you have to be like at a certain place every day, but you also have to study throughout that entire clerkship for the exam at the end. So I think that's usually the hardest year for people. After 3rd year, you take step 2, the second part of your board exams. 4th year, you have clerkships, but no exams. So it's a little bit lighter. You do a lot of time during 4th year is set aside for applying to residency. So most people find that the lightest year. I would say if I had to put a number on it, on average, medical school is probably a 50 to 60 hour a week workload, or like full-time plus, but that's an average. So, you might have weeks where it's like 30, 40 hours, and then the next week might be like 60, 70 hours. So it can vary. And then you could see there, the ones that are starred, I think, are the most time consuming. What are the most time consuming spots? We just saw this, but just to outline, your board exams are pretty tough because the time leading up, there's a lot of studying. 3rd year, clerkships and studying for self-exams. Applying to residency also is kind of pretty consuming. And then step 1 probably used to be the most stressful and time consuming part of medical school, but it's becoming pass fail, which means it probably won't be as stressful as it used to be. However, that nobody knows yet how that's going to affect things. Like it might just be that step 2 will morph into the new step 1. Anyway, these are not things that are totally relevant right now, but just to keep in the back of your mind, like where the hot spots are. So, if you're thinking of becoming a doctor, you probably know that it's a long and sometimes difficult journey, but there are breaks along the way. So what are those breaks? You can defer acceptance to medical school. So a lot of medical schools will let you, after you're accepted, defer, meaning like you can take a break for a year or 2 before matriculating. The summer between the 1st year of medical school and the 2nd year of medical school is usually free, like universally across the US. I know that at Sinai, a lot of people like to use that time for research, but there are people who just like want to travel and live life. So really it's kind of like up to people how they want to spend that summer. I had my first daughter between the 1st and 2nd year of medical school, so that worked out really well. Other people use that time for other things. You do have some elective time during your 3rd and 4th year of medical school, but this varies school to school. So I know that at Sinai, we get 28 weeks of elective over the 3rd and 4th year, but I have friends in schools only get like 12 weeks. So it's not gonna be the same. But the idea with elective time is that you can choose which elective to do, and some electives are really light. So like, I know I had a friend who got married during medical school and got married during an elective block that was super light, things like that. 4th year is pretty light because you don't have any exams. Some people take a research year. The most common time that people take one is between 3rd and 4th year, but there's no like official rule about that. Many schools are going to let you take research years at other points too. Why would someone want to take a research year? They need a break. They want to match into a really competitive specialty, and some of those you just need research to be more competitive. A million reasons. Some people do an extra degree. The next thing I want to talk about, the decelerated year, that's something that I did. I think it's a great idea if you want to take extra time in medical school. They do this at Sinai. I'm pretty sure they do this at Einstein as well. The idea of a decelerated year is that you take your year of medical school. Most people do this for 3rd year because it's the hardest year, and you split it into 2 years, and you just divide it up kind of in a way that's convenient for you. So for example, me, I was going to have my baby during my year 3B. So I made sure that those 2-3 months were totally empty so that I could take time off when my baby was born. Anyways, I think this is almost like the best solution if you are having kids or anything else that keeps you busy out of medicine, because instead of just having like a really busy year of medical school and then like a break, you're able to spread it out. And I just think it's sort of a better solution. I would say that if your school doesn't do this, bring it up to them, and maybe they will. Maybe you'll be that person who initiates this thing in your school. At Sinai, it doesn't cost any more money to do it. Like, they just split your tuition over 2 years. So there's really not much to lose. If you do your MD PhD years, your research years are definitely lighter. Before I went to Sinai, I spoke to 2 MD PhD students who both told me that they had their kids during their research years because it was much easier than during medical school. And then you can take a break between medical school and residency. It's not common and it's not recommended for certain specialties, but it is something that some people do. What do people use the extra time in medical school for? So I don't want you all to think that the only thing you can use that time for is having a family. I mean, people do a million things during their medical training. This is just a list I came up with of, like, off the top of my head, from people in my class and people I know. People have hobbies. Some people are taking care of a sick family member or sick loved one. People are involved with startups, side businesses. A lot of people use the research year for an extra degree. Research for competitive specialties. Some people just have health issues and can't do medical school at that really crazy pace, so they take a decelerated year or a break. People use it for dating, marriage, children, travel, and really this is not an exhaustive list. You can fill the blank in with anything you want. So having children in medical school, before I even broach this topic, I want to put a huge disclaimer out there that I really do not want anybody coming out of this session saying that JOWMA is encouraging you or telling you to have children during medical school. I mean, obviously that's clearly none of our business, and we have no place in that decision. That's a decision that's 100% yours. So please, I want to make that perfectly clear, that we're not telling you what to do with your life. But we are a Jewish Orthodox organization, and usually family priorities are pretty high on people's, families is pretty high on people's priority lists. So what we are here to do is, if you do choose to have children during medical school or during medical training, we're here to show you how people have done it. I want you all to know what Title IX is, and I will share with you resources, tips, and advice that can help you. So I think the first thing to think about, if you're thinking about having a family in medical school, is the culture in medical schools. So schools are going to be very different in their culture. You want to try to learn these things. How flexible will they be about scheduling? How much time do they give people off after giving birth? How have other student parents been treated? How have schools accommodated pregnancy-related health issues? And this one I think is really important. Did the school take the time to put together a policy? If they don't even have a policy about any of this, it means that, like, it's not even on their list of important things. I don't think that speaks too well of the school. I think every school, even if it's not a great policy, they should have something put together about what their policy is regarding these issues. And is there a paternity leave policy? I think that also speaks to the culture of the school. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that cultures and attitudes shift very quickly. So whatever information you're getting, try to make sure it's as up to date as possible. I know, for example, that I spoke to someone about this issue. I spoke to someone about Sinai regarding these issues, and she had a lot of children during medical school, I think maybe 4 or 5. And she felt like they were, she was very neutral about it. She was like, they were not unsupportive, but they didn't go out of their way to be supportive. I can tell you I'm at Sinai now, and I feel like they went out of their way to really accommodate me and be supportive, you know, so a really good shift, a shift in a really good direction. So just make sure whatever information you're getting, it's up to date. So what is Title IX? I'm by no means a Title IX expert. I don't know that much about Title IX, but I do think that if you're coming out of this session, you should know that a thing called Title IX exists and how it's sort of relevant to your life. So it's a federal law that was passed, I think in the 1970s, but don't quote me on that. It applies to all schools that receive federal funding, which would include medical schools because they get federal funding. The basic like idea of Title IX is to protect against sexual harassment, but there are also other things in Title IX that are important to know. It prohibits discrimination against pregnant women or breastfeeding women. I think it says somewhere there that schools must provide accommodations and space for breastfeeding women to breastfeed and pump. And I think a toilet does not count. So your school has to have a place for you to do that. Being pregnant or breastfeeding cannot affect your grade. Every school should have a Title IX coordinator, so it can't hurt to just find out who that person is in your school. And keep in mind, of course, that while yes, this is the law, the culture of the school is probably going to be the main factor shaping how the school will accommodate you. Some tips and advice if you want to have children during medical school: create a budget for childcare. Depending on where you are, the cost varies tremendously, so try to think about that early on. Try to create multiple layers of childcare. For example, our structure was always that we send our kids to daycare, then we have a second layer of babysitters who come on the weekends, evenings, times that are really busy. And then as a third tier, my family doesn't live nearby and they don't help on a day-to-day basis, but they do step up during really busy times, like during my board exams, for example. So that's an example of like multiple layers of childcare. Usually if you're in medicine, like one layer is not enough. A lot of people just get a live-in nanny because that's kind of a bunch of layers in one. Enlist as much support as you can: financial, emotional, practical. Don't be a martyr. Don't try to do it on your own. Don't refuse any bit of help anybody offers you. This one was a little hard for me because I feel like, and probably many people feel this way, like you don't really want to share your pregnancy so early on. It's just, I feel like people want to hold that close to the chest, definitely in the first trimester. But if you're in a place, for example, like me, where there's year wait list to get into a daycare, you're gonna have to call it daycare up like very soon after you find out that you're pregnant. Same thing about reaching out to course directors and deans. It did take definitely of me a little bit of extra courage to kind of overcome that need for privacy, but it's important to let people know early on so that you can plan. Find other people in that school who've been parents who've done it, and please share when it's relevant. For example, if you're on like a surgery rotation where they're doing fluoroscopy, which is X-ray, that's not safe if you're pregnant. Some surgeries use different things that are teratogens. Teratogens are substances that can potentially be dangerous to a developing fetus. You don't want to be exposed to that, so don't be shy about it. Let people know when it's relevant. This is just something that, again, not relevant for the near future, but something to keep in the back of your mind. There are testing accommodations available for board exams. People use this for a variety of reasons. Some people have health issues. If you're pregnant, I don't think you're gonna be able to sit through 8 hours without extra bathroom breaks. Definitely not in the third trimester. If you're breastfeeding and you need breaks to pump, this is not an exhaustive list. There are lots of things, but just some examples. So your school should have a disability officer who can help you with this. And the reason that I threw the slide in is because you have to do this very well in advance. You can't like take care of this 2 weeks or even a month before your exam. Like I know, I'm pretty sure people I've spoken to said like 6 months to even a year. Just make sure this is something that you're on board early enough. You get all your doctor's notes and you apply super early so that you don't have any issues going forward. So that is pretty much all the information. This is just a slide I threw in at the end. Something interesting that I recently came across. There's this Japanese concept called ikigai, which means a reason for being. I'll give you a moment to look at it. It basically takes 4 different spheres of life and shows you that when they overlap, you get this concept ikigai, which is like the ultimately fulfilling job. And the reason I bring this here is I think that if you're a doctor, I feel like you were in a really fortunate position to be able to achieve Ikigai. If you made it to medical school, you probably love medicine. So, there goes your yellow circle. You're probably good at it because the bar to get into medical school is really high. And the world definitely needs doctors, and you also get paid pretty well to be a doctor, and that covers all four. And then you can see what happens if you kind of have two circles overlapping. For example, if you're doing something that you're good at and you're paid for it, so you have a great profession, you might be comfortable, but you have feelings of emptiness, so on and so forth. Anyway, I just thought it was nice that although medicine is difficult, and I feel like a lot of times people harp on that, it's extremely, extremely fulfilling. And I think it's one of those professions where we're really lucky to be able to get to this Ikigai. Okay, so that is it for me. I'm gonna stop the share, and we'll take Dr. Segelnik, Dr. Goldman, if you have anything to add on the presentation, any comments, anything you want to say, feel free to jump in.
So I'll just say a little bit my personal choices. Between M1 and M2, I took my honeymoon to Ireland, so traveled. Between M2 and 3, after I took my step 1, or for us it's complex 1 because I'm osteopathic, I went to Italy. And then between M3 and 4, I had my daughter. So it was more like later on in med school. So I did travel. I didn't really do anything medicine related. It was more like, we need a break. We did end up pushing our honeymoon off for a year. And then the other thing I want to mention is that culture of the school is very important, but if you get into a school where the culture might not be there, don't be afraid to push the bar, push the limit, pave the way. My school did not have like a breastfeeding lounge. Me and Dr. Anna Weinstein, another JOWMA member, we're both breastfeeding, and we had them set up like a full lounge with a fridge, with a sink, with paper towels, with water bottles. So don't be afraid to like ask for what you are entitled to, and you'd be surprised that it just wasn't asked for in the past. And then for my complex 2, I was breastfeeding. I did not apply for disability because it was too late for me. So it doesn't.
My slide.
Yeah. And they told me I'd have to switch my date, and I wanted to just get it over with. So I ate a bagel and pumped in the bathroom. So you make it work. You do what you have to do. I don't know if I'd recommend it, but it's not necessarily the first thing you're thinking about when you're thinking about boards and having a baby and breastfeeding. You don't even know if you're going to end up breastfeeding after you have a baby. Some people can't, some people don't, some people don't want to. So I made it work.
Dr. Goldman, any comments?
Sure. I don't have too many comments, but I guess I wasn't a mother and I wasn't even married at the time I was in medical school. But what I will say is that regardless of where you are in life, whether you're single and you're looking to meet somebody, or you're married, don't have kids, or you're married and you do have kids, either you've already had kids or like during medical school, you just really need to have a good support system. So like for my own self, I was really interested in going to a medical school that was close to my family because I knew that it was going to be challenging and rigorous, and that I wanted to have as many people available to me as possible, just so that it could help ease me along the way. And I really think that that made a difference. So that's just my only point that I'd like to add there.
No, that is so important. Thank you. And I feel like, that support system can look many different ways, but you have to have that.
Yeah, that's the reason
thank you.
Born, raised, stayed, live, haven't moved off of Long Island. So
thank you. Okay, so I think if there are any questions on the presentation, you can type it in the chat. We'll answer it now or later, but feel free to chime in the chat at any time. I think I'm going to pull up our questions that were submitted. There were a lot of questions submitted. I think we're going to try to get to all of them. if we don't, I'll try to post answers on our chat, but let's see if we can get to all of them. Give me a moment. Thought I opened this before, but looks like maybe I did not. Wait a minute. Give me a moment. Okay, sorry, it looks like I forgot to download this before, so I'm gonna download it now. Okay, so I'm gonna give the floor to Dr. Segelnik and Dr. Goldman. I mean, I'll read the questions and maybe I'll chime in here and there, but they are going to be doing most of the talking because I already did a lot of talking. Give me a second. Okay, so the first question we have, sorry, give me a minute. Okay, question one, considering the large workload involved in attending medical school, how much energy needs to be actively placed into maintaining a healthy home, making sure enough time is spent at home with wife/husband/kids, not asking hashkafically. So Dr. Goldman, if you want to take this first.
Sure. So I think that it's difficult to quantify a certain amount of time, and that really depends on where you are in life. I mean, I'm assuming that this question was targeted more towards people who already were settled down at that point. You know, I think that if your family is a priority to you, or if anything is a priority to you, you make the time for it. It's not necessarily that you have the time, but it's just how you choose to spend your time.
Thank you. Yeah, Dr. Segelnik, anything to add?
Yeah, so the only thing I would add, you know, because I was married before I started, it's not so much energy, but it's creativity. Things might look a little bit different in medical school. Like sometimes dates for us were just going to the grocery store together, going for a car wash, just spending time outside the home together, not necessarily a real date night, but just, you know, taking that break from studying and saying, okay, I'm yours. Maybe we have to do grocery shopping, but let's do it together and spend this time together. And then once you get into the flow of things, it kind of, you know, becomes normal. And like you said in your presentation, there's highs and lows. So there are going to be times where you're busier and times where, you know, you have more time where you'll be able to fit those things in.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great advice. I don't have much to add. I'm just going to say that I was just telling Dr. Goldman and Dr. Segelnik before we started that every single model and like situation out there, you know, somebody has done it. So try to find, you know, different models of how people set their life up for this to work and pick like a model that resonates with you. Is what I would say. And also, like Dr. Segelnik said, there are highs and lows. Like I did 2 decelerated years. So there were times that I had a lot of time for my family. Definitely when my daughters were born, I had time for that. So, you know, try to work things out so that you have pockets of time. Great, thank you. Next question, Dr. Segelnik, if you could take this one first. Is there an MD, PhD physician scientist career that allows for flexible hours in raising children? Dr. Segelnik.
Yeah, I don't know much about MD, PhD, but I think you discussed, you know, in the presentation that those research years are flexible. And, you know, from people that I do know, it seems that that's when they do have, you know, most of their children.
Thank you. Dr. Goldman, anything to add?
Well, I wish that I knew somebody like, you know, something from Jewish community that was an MD, PhD. I do know people that are MD, PhD, but I can't really say that I know what their personal experience is with it. Like Jacqueline said, and like you said in your presentation, it seems that the research years are the more flexible years. So that is all I have to say about that.
Yeah, the two people I spoke to about this, I don't know them personally, but both of them chose to have their kids during their research year. So I would say definitely easier than medical school. Great. Dr. Goldman, what is something you wished you knew as a pre-med student slash didn't feel prepared for? Sorry, something happened to my document. Give me a second. Okay, what is something you wished you knew as a pre-med or you didn't feel prepared for in medical school and beyond?
Okay, so that's a good question. I would say that, something that was a bit challenging was adjusting to third year of medical school and doing clerkships while simultaneously having to study for the shelf exams at the end of the clerkships. I think leading up to that, I never worked a full-time job. So my full-time job was just being a student. And even though, when you're third year of medical school, you still are a student, you're transitioning really from being a full-time student to having to basically go to work every day and you're tired, you've been at work the whole day and you just want to go to bed, but you have to study for your shelf exam when you get home. And it's also just in addition to the actual management of time that involves, it's more independent studying because, we're used to getting lectures by various teachers and then being given exams by those teachers who are lecturing us. And when you're in your third year of medical school, it's a little bit more independent. You have a bunch of different resources that you could potentially use, and then you have to figure out what you're going to use, how you're going to budget your time. So I thought that was something that I wasn't fully prepared for, but you just figure out what works for you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Dr. Segelnik.
For me, it was more just the transitioning to med school to begin with. I was a coaster. Like high school, I coasted. College, I coasted. I never had to really sit down for hours and studying. You can't coast med school. You have to put in the time. So a big adjustment for me was just how do I sit and study for hours? Like what, so what I learned and what I works and what I still do now as a resident is just like splitting my time over a longer period of time instead of doing a 12-hour day of studying, where I'd rather just do 3 hours a day for a longer period of time than one really big day. So that kind of helped me transition instead of because you'll see once you get into med school, some of your classmates are in the library 24/7, and that it doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to add, I mean, it's similar to what you both were saying, but if you get accepted to US medical school, it's very likely that you were somewhere at the top of your class in high school and college. But when you come to medical school, everybody's like that. So that's a big adjustment. And the workload is also, adjusted accordingly. Like they know that you're smart and ambitious and hardworking, and they really throw it at you. So that's, I think, a big adjustment. One other thing I'll throw in there is just a hook. I don't think it's something any of you need to worry now, but just know in the back of your mind, something I wish I knew in the beginning of medical school was all the coded language around the metrics that are important in medical school. I mean, this is changing. It used to be that your step 1 score was really important. So nobody in your school is going to sit there and give you a lecture about how your step 1 score is really important, but it sort of is. And also the secret coded language of how competitive certain specialties are and how competitive certain programs. There's a bunch of coded language that I don't think any school is going to sit and give you a lecture on. You learn this information from your classmates and from SDN and from Reddit, but kind of keep feelers out right away, just so that if you do want to go into one of the more competitive specialties, the earlier you start with your research and with your connections and with all of that, it's just a little bit easier for you. You want to know what you're up against. I'm just going to throw that in as keep it in the back of your mind before you start med school. Okay, I think we got that one covered. All right, I think we're up to you, Dr. Segelnik, to go first. Is the workload of a medical student all hype, or is it manageable? I like this question.
I like it too. I might steal it for an Instagram post one day.
It's a great question. Okay.
I think the hype is real. I think that it is, and it was the most challenging time. I honestly think sometimes med school might even be harder than residency, but it is completely manageable. You just have to find out what works for you. Like I was just saying, I cannot sit there 10 to 16 hours a day and study. Can I sit
Neither can
there
I.
6 hours? Yeah, I could sit there 6 hours, right? Um, so you have to figure out what sources work for you, how you like to study. Do you like to watch videos? Do you like to do practice questions? Do you like to make index cards? There's so many different things, and we could tell you what we did, but that doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And then the whole time management thing, so if I'm studying 6 hours a day instead of 16 hours, I have time to exercise, I have time to date my husband, I have time to cook dinner for my family, which makes me feel well rested and well rounded, and makes me study better because I actually slept and I actually ate and I actually exercised and I did all these things. So it's not easy. I don't want anyone to think medical school is easy, but it's doable. We all do it,
Dr. Goldman, thank you. Dr. Goldman.
All right. Yeah, I think I have a little bit of a different perspective on this. And maybe this is just because I went to Ramaz for high school and it was very rigorous and I had to study a lot in high school. And I was commuting from New Jersey to New York every day. So I wouldn't get home, like on an early day, I wouldn't get home until 6:30 p.m. And if I stayed for extracurriculars, I wouldn't get home until 7:15, 7:20. So I felt like high school was intense. And then I went to Johns Hopkins for college, which wasn't exactly a walk in the park either. So I felt like by the time that I got to medical school, I was pretty used to having a very difficult and challenging workload. So I felt that medical school definitely was not easy. It was a lot of work, but it was just studying different types of material. So before medical school, I was studying whatever I was expected to know for my classes in high school or for my classes in college. But then when I got to medical school, it was same time, I think, put into the studying, but just studying medical related topics. So I definitely thought it was manageable, but
You were like well prepared, basically.
I thought so, yeah.
I'm not sure I can say the same about my Sacco of education, but that's great. I mean, that's like amazing. That it sounds like you went to great school. So,
Well, I
yeah,
think I spent a lot more years of my life slaving away, and maybe I didn't need to. There were plenty of people that went to my medical school that probably didn't have as hard of a high school experience as I had. So we all end up in the same place regardless of where we come from. So definitely not telling anybody that they need to go to a super hard high school in order to succeed in medical school. Plenty of people in my medical school went on to excellent residencies afterwards, not having had the same background.
Thank you. That was great. I think I'm going to add to this question that, manageable is going to look very different to every person. So it's hard to say what's manageable for one person is not for another. I will say some of this will depend also on what specialty you want to do, because some specialties, the specialties that are more competitive are going to require higher board scores, more honors on your clerkships. They're going to require better grades. And as you're probably learning in undergrad, it's much harder to go from like a 90 to 100 than it is to go from 80 to 90, right? Like as you climb that curve, it gets harder and harder. So I will say a lot of how hard your medical school is depends on where do you want, what do you want to do after? But people do find time for other things. So, I mean, yeah, it's a lot of this that depends on factors. Okay, next question. How much free time is available? Any advice on dating in med school? Dr. Goldman, are we up to you?
Yeah.
I'm losing track. Okay.
Yeah, no problem. So I think a lot of the free time is really your own choice. Like Jacqueline was saying, she spent a little bit less time than some of her colleagues who studied for maybe all 24 hours a day. So I think that free time is really up to you. For me, I needed to have things going on in my personal life in order to feel like I'm not just spending every living second of my life studying. And it was really important for me to maintain a social life. And I did date a lot in medical school because I had in mind that I wanted to settle down, and I took dating seriously. It was almost like, I don't want to say a second job, but I prioritized it. So something that I did was using various dating websites. So I was on YU Connect, saw you at Sinai. And then I also used JSwipe, which is actually the app that I met my husband on. So I think that those are really helpful. And I would say that having, online platforms for dating definitely helps in medical school, because you don't necessarily have time to go to all the social things that are going on. I did go to some singles events, but sometimes it just doesn't work out. Like if you have an exam the next day, you're not going to that social event. But there are definitely ways to meet people. And, I definitely encourage people to take advantage of like social platforms.
So I'll just, I'll add.
Thank you, Dr. Segelnik. I think it was on mute. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'll just add, I was already married, but you date your husband too. But in terms of free time, you're gonna know right after your exam. That's usually when you have the most free time, before you start like a next block of work. So you can kind of time things around then, because you get your exam schedule way in advance. So I don't think we touched upon that in like the PowerPoint. Like, yes, there are like specific times, like before step 1, step 2, all those things, but actually on your like weekly, monthly basis, right before exam, you're really busy, you're really studying, but then right after you take the exam, our exams were always on a Friday. So that weekend was always good. Like I could always schedule a date or an event or a social gathering the weekend after the exam. So there are times like consistently throughout the year, all years, that you will have that availability.
Thank you. I don't think I have much to add because I was married by the time I started med school. So, all right, next question. Can you talk about the different working options once you're a doctor, like the different lifestyles you could potentially have? Basically, how being a doctor does not mean never seeing your family. Okay. Glad this question was asked, Dr. Segelnik.
Yeah, so I honestly don't know any physician that never sees their family. I'll talk about my specialty. I'm family medicine. Family medicine is great because you could do so many different lifestyles. You could do just outpatient, 9 to 5, office hours. So you could, be home for dinner every night. You could work in a nursing home a few days a week. You can do inpatient hospital medicine, where you have usually the schedule is like 7 days on, 7 days off. So you get more time. But even my friends in like surgical specialties, you're not on call every single day of the rest of your life. You have call days that you're on, so you'll be on 24s. Same with like OB. We have a bunch of OBGYNs in JOWMA. They don't take call every day. Maybe it's every third day. So I think honestly you can make yeah. There are ones that are harder, and then I'll let Jessica talk about radiology, which has a great lifestyle as well. But I think that what you need to do is pick what you love to do, and then you'll figure out a way to make it work. Maybe you don't want to work full time, maybe you're going to do it part-time, but you're not going to be happy picking something just because it fits your lifestyle. Like you won't reach that Japanese word that you mentioned, because you'll have a good profession and a job, but are you doing what
you're gonna miss one of the circles?
Yeah, you're gonna miss the circle. So where I love primary care. So there are days where, like, especially in residency, where I have to be at the hospital at 5 and I'm not coming home till the next day. Does it suck? Yes. Do I miss my family? Yes. But I love what I do. I like absolutely love what I do. So it makes that one hard day better.
Thank you. I want to add, put some notes on this question. So whoever asked this question, whoever's thinking about this question, this is really important. This is something people don't realize. There's a huge, oh wait, sorry, Dr. Goldman, you're supposed to go first. I got.
No worries. Okay. Do you want me to take it or do you want to continue?
Yeah, you go first. I'll just add at the end. You're probably going to say what I'm going to say. So.
Oh, we'll see.
I think.
So I thought what Jacqueline said was fantastic. I mean, you know, I think that your lifestyle really depends on your choice of specialty. And I know she was talking about OB-GYN and surgery and how you can even still maintain a decent work-life balance if you do those specialties. But at the end of the day, you have to love your specialty and be excited and enthusiastic about it, because you do spend a lot of your time at work and you need to love what you do. I think for radiology, I'm super, super happy with it in terms of quality of life. Yeah, so I think a lot of you probably don't know, but radiology is considered an advanced program. So you can't do radiology straight out of medical school. You have to do a preliminary year in something else first. So I said I did my internship in internal medicine at North Shore and LIJ before I started my residency in radiology at Montefiore. So I did the intern year, and I got the experience of what it's like to rotate as a resident in internal medicine. And I could say that my quality of life improved drastically after my intern year when I started radiology residency. I think as a resident, it's been very manageable. And my ultimate goal is to be in women's imaging. So, you know, breast imaging. And I think that really affords people a good quality of life. I mean, most subspecialties within radiology do as well. There's even a subspecialty, interventional radiology, which I would say is the busiest subspecialty within radiology. But if you're somebody that likes procedures, but you don't necessarily want to be as busy as a general surgeon, it's a good option if that's something that you're interested in. But yeah, I think that it's really mostly dependent on your choice of specialty. So if you want to have a good quality of life, you know, love what you do, but just, you know, make sure that you're choosing a specialty that's going to give you the quality of life that you want.
Yeah, that was great. And as predicted, you said like 90% of what I was going to say. But yeah, I think this is something that like you should be thinking about right when you start medical school. You should be exploring specialties and see which one really fits you. I feel like a lot of us start medical school extremely idealistic, and that's great. But you do have like a long life ahead of you after medical school, and you want to make sure that it fits your goals. Like Dr. Goldman, I also was kind of, you know, lifestyle was definitely something that, you know, I factored in when choosing a specialty. I'm going into anesthesiology because I love procedures and I love the OR and I like the critical care component, but it's a specialty that has a lot of different options and a lot of, you know, a whole spectrum of how much or how little you want to work. So I know people say choose what you love. If you're someone like me, there are like a lot of different fields you might love and you don't know how to pick. So then you may as well pick the one that will afford you the best lifestyle. Just a little tip I heard from someone. But thank you, Dr. Goldman, Dr. Segelnik. Those were fantastic answers. Okay, how can you study smarter, not harder?
All right. So I'm going to really talk mostly about my first 2 years of medical school, since I think that, you know, that covers most of the studying part of medical school. So I would really study mostly what I was learning in the lectures shortly after I had the lecture. So I would try to stay on top of the material. And then right before whatever exam I was taking, like the weekend before that exam, I would go quickly through everything. Because I had already reviewed it once, it wasn't really such a stressful thing to just breeze through everything again and have a second look. But that was my strategy. So, go through everything as I was learning it initially, and then do a rapid review before the exam and just try to get through as much as I could. And I felt like that was a strategy that worked for me, but everybody is different. So everybody has to just find whatever works best for them. But I think you don't want to be in a position where you're cramming and looking at things for the very first time right before the exam, because then you're going to be stressed out, not focused, and you probably won't do as well if you're feeling anxious.
Thank you, Dr. Segelnik.
So my strategy was similar. I'm a little bit type A neurotic, like I think most of us. So I'm a list maker. So what I would do is actually make a list of every single lecture between one exam and the next. And I would count how many I needed to do before and split them up equally till then. Like I said, I don't like to study huge amount of time. So I had to figure out how many do I need to study per day to meet my goal without, stressing and killing myself. So do I need to do 3 lectures a day, 5 lectures a day? And I would do this little amount every day, and then the review everything with practice questions right before the exam. That's what I felt worked the best for me. Same when it came to step 1, how many questions do I need to do in New World, split it up over the whatever months I need as my dedicated time, and then do a little bit every day. That was my smarter, not harder. Maybe that's harder for other people to come up with that schedule, but that's what worked for me. And then on clerkships, like when you're studying for your shelf exams, I would do the same thing. How many online med-ed videos do I have to watch before I get to my shelf? And how many UWorld questions are there before I hit my shelf? And divide it up. And something I found helpful was studying at the hospital so that I was able to manage my time instead of doing it once I got home.
Thank you. Those are great tips. I will say that this is something everyone should take some time in the beginning of medical school to figure out, because it's not the same for everyone. I'll say the things that work for me. Okay, so first I have like a really embarrassing story that I was reminded of when Dr. Goldman said something about not being a last minute studier. So I sort of am a last minute studier. And in our first anatomy, the way anatomy works at Sinai is you have like these table conferences or like live quizzes where they quiz you like in front of the cadaver. And it's a group, excuse me, it's a group grade. So like how everyone does, like you all get one grade, right? So there's like pressure you don't want to be that one person who pulls down your whole group. So like 2 days before the exam, we had like a mock session, and I'm a last minute studier. So like I didn't do so well. But then, I really buckled down close to exams, and when the actual, conference happened, I knew everything, like I got every answer correct. And one of my table mates said something like, "Oh, I was so nervous about you 2 days ago, but like, wow, you really killed it." Just, so it was like, you realize like just how your actions can affect other people. This person was like sitting there biting their nails about me, that I'm going to sink the entire group. Anyway, that story aside, I'm a very active learner. I don't think I've read a textbook since high school or early college, maybe. I learned through like videos, like the Khan Academy style, and I learned through questions and flashcards like Anki. You give me a textbook to read, I will not remember anything. So I don't do that. I haven't bought a single textbook for medical school. I think I have some PDFs downloaded, never looked at them. So you have to figure out what works for you. I would say that Anki is almost universally a great resource. There are some people who don't like Anki, but like, I think like, 98 out of 100 people are gonna like Anki, and Anki works really well for them. And right now there are decks for everything out there in the internet ether. So learn how to use Anki. Okay. Oh, and one more thing. So the method I use for like big exams and board exams is I asked my classmates like what a typical amount of time is needed to study for a board exam, for example, I don't know, like step 2, and whatever answer they gave me, I doubled or tripled it because I had 2 kids at the time. So that was kind of, once I had 2 kids, like I needed to do that because there's no way I could put in, in any given day, the same amount of time for studying. So that's like another method that worked really, really well for me. Okay, next question. Sorry, something with my Excel sheet, my transition from PC to Mac. Sorry, everybody. Give me a moment. Do any of you have the Google Doc? Because I feel like, oh, never mind. Okay, I got it.
You want me to read the question?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
How do you balance motherhood and medical school? Dr. Segelnik, I think it's your turn.
Yes, thank you. So I guess this is a good question because I had a kid in med school. So for me, so I had Jaden at the end of 3rd year, so I really did my whole 4th year with her. So I can't talk about studying for STEP, studying for this, and 4th year. Fortunately, there's not much exams. I did take my step 2 or Comlex 2, 7 weeks postpartum, which I talked about, pumping and eating a bagel in the bathroom. And the nice thing is that in the beginning, they're potatoes, and you can hold a potato while you study, and you could put a potato, if you need to feed a potato, you could feed a potato. You could put a potato on the floor. So you could put a potato in a swing. So they're very mobile, and you kind of just like, okay, I just fed her, so I've got 3 hours. I can do it. And if she's crying, you want to hold her, you hold her while you're watching a video. You hold her while you're doing a question. Once I went back, after I took my exams and I went back full time as a student, did my sub-Is, and the rest of the requirements for 4th year, what I found helpful was, like, first of all, again, they're like potatoes, so they don't really understand that you're missing. So most of the guilt comes from yourself, not your actual child. So just like coming to terms with that mom guilt is that it's like, this is something that I'm making up myself, and that my kid is actually fine. She's safe. She's well fed. She's well taken care of. Maybe it's not me doing it 24/7, but it's my husband, it's my nanny, it's my mom, it's someone who loves her. And then picking something small that I tried to do, like I would read to her a book every night before bed since she was born, before she could even see, and that was our thing. So like, and my husband, like when they're little, they don't really have a sleep schedule yet. So like he'd wait, we'd read a book, and then we'd put her down, even if it was 10 o'clock at night, because they are up anyways, all the time. So that's what I found worked for me, is like, if I got to do this little thing that added to her life, like that was good. And then another advice that actually one of the moms recommended to me is, like, milestones, they don't happen if you're not home. So you're not allowed to talk about it. So if she took a step, if she walked when I wasn't home, she didn't walk. So that was a rule we had in the house. Like, you're not allowed to send me a video of my child taking her first roll if I didn't see it. So when I see it, it's her first roll. So, but thank God, because 4th year is very flexible, I actually got to see most of the milestones. So that's my spiel.
Thank you. I guess I'll chime in. So again, this is very individual, and there are lots of different models of how people make it work. There isn't one right way to do it, but I'll share, I guess. So I was, I had my first daughter, like I said, between the 1st and 2nd year of medical school. And during my 2nd year of medical school and 1st year, actually, my husband had a job in another state due to just how our life was set up geographically before medical school. So I was effectively a single mom during my whole 2nd year of medical school. And I made it work. So how did I make it work? I mean, first of all, my husband had a really generous paternity leave from his job. So he was around for 3 months, the first 3 months. And then after that, I had full-time daycare, plus I had a babysitter come every night. And I would study, the babysitter would like take care of my daughter, but I would study nearby. So like if she needed to be fed, I could breastfeed her. If I just wanted to hold her, I could hold her. And like Dr. Segelnik said that, you know, when they're young, it's easy to do this, and then they sleep a lot. So, you know, that's kind of, you know, how we made it work, lots of babysitting on the weekends. But, you know, like there are lots of different ways to set this up. I will say that one thing I kind of learned the hard way, you know, you got to figure out what drives your own gas tank, like what you really need to function. For me, one of those things is sleep. And that was a real struggle with my daughter when she was, you know, newborn. I mean, eventually at like 8-9 months, like she slept fully through the night, like, you know, 10 hours. But that was something I really struggled with. And then so when I had my second daughter, my husband and I chose to, it was very expensive, but we saw it as an investment. We did have night help for a chunk of time where I was, you know, pretty newly postpartum, I don't know, 2-3 months after a baby, and I had to be in my medicine rotation. So sometimes you have to think creatively and out of the box. And, you know, I do not regret it. It was, you know, the way we looked at it, a financial investment. So there are lots of different ways. And then I was able to sleep at night because somebody was taking care of my baby at night. Just different ideas I'm throwing at you, and you'll speak to people, you'll see there are lots of different ways to make it work. Okay, I guess we'll move on. Did you find that medical school presented challenges to religious life? If yes, how would you deal with those challenges? I'm not going to answer this question. I'm just going to put it in that I literally did not have any incidents in medical school where I felt like my religious life was challenged. So I have like nothing to say on this topic. So Dr. Segelnik and Dr. Goldman, the floor is yours.
All right, I think it's my turn to go. So fortunately, I have a similar experience. So I went to New Jersey Medical School, like I said, and fortunately, they were very, very accommodating. I think part of that really has to do with the culture of the school. I don't want to throw any schools under the bus, but I was aware of, because somebody in my class in medical school was dating somebody who was at another medical school, and he was observant, but like the culture in that school, or what they had established, was not that observance is strictly accommodated. I don't know if that's still the case today, but I'll just briefly mention a story. When I had the high holidays as a third year medical student, I was on the neuro rotation. And I remember that because of the way the Chagim fell out, like a lot of them were in the middle of the week. So they did accommodate it and they let me take off, but I just remember it was a really crazy month because, they didn't want to accommodate me and give me days off without me doing the same amount of work as the other students. So they, instead of having me come in during those weekdays when I would have had to come in, they had me come in on, I think it was 4 or 5 consecutive Sundays in a row. So I'm happy about that. Like I was happy that I was able to be off for the Chagim, and the weekends were actually more relaxed. Most of the time I actually got out like before noon. So it was a nice setup. But yeah, I think hopefully a medical school should accommodate that. Really, schools should not be giving people issues for observance related matters. Dr. Segelnik, anything?
Yes. So what I would recommend is, if you're going to a school that's not like heavily Jewish populated, forming a group. We had a like NICOM Jews WhatsApp group, so that we were all in this together, and we texted each other, okay, this is when the high holidays fall out. And if there's a test that fell out on that day, we all took it the same day, rescheduled. So our school did accommodate us. I never had an issue until I got to 4th year. On 4th year, one of my sub-Is said that we have to work on Saturdays, and I said, no, like we don't, like, why can't I work on a Sunday instead of a Saturday? And it got to the point where I had to bring it up to my dean, and my dean used to be a program director, and he said he's never heard of such a thing where you can't accommodate a Jewish person. And he, wrote them a letter and said, either you offer her a Sunday or she just won't come in on Saturday. So we did solve it, and I passed all my, rotations. I am glad I learned that, because I didn't end up applying to that program at all, because do you really want to be at that type of program for residency? So, like, everyone has their own experiences, but it definitely is out there, my opinion. And again, not like hushkaffically or what your rabbi says. As a med student, I didn't feel like it was necessary for me to work on a Shabbos. Like, if you're, like, some will argue you're part of the medical team, whatever, like, you'll speak to your rabbi and whatever. But for me, I said, when I am a doctor, that's a different thing. When I'm a med student, I'm a student. There's no need for me to do it. So, but it worked out in the end.
Oh, Efrat, I think you're muted.
Sorry, thanks. Next question. So I think this next question is going to need a whole webinar, but we'll try to answer it. How does it work with money in med school since you don't have an income? I understand some med students have partners who bring in the money. Sure, we all have partners that bring in, like, okay. But if one doesn't have that, how do you pay for expenses? Okay, so yeah, I think, okay, Dr. Who are we up to?
I think me.
Dr. Segelnik.
So I'll introduce you to my little friend called student loans. And look, you'll have someone who can afford med school and afford all the expenses, and that's great. I would say 90%, if not more, take out student loans. My husband, he does, he did work, but we were young, I was 22, I don't know, whatever. So he was just starting out in his field. So it's not like we made hundreds of thousands of dollars to afford everything. So I would take out enough for medical school, plus, medical school expenses, whatever that entails, gas and food and equipment, boards, you have to factor that in. And then he covered like rent and, groceries and stuff like that. So, and then also we took out a little bit extra to go on our honeymoon and to Italy, because that was important to us. What's the difference if you have $300,000 of loans, you make it 310. So.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Goldman.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, I'm gonna also have to say student loans, it's, most people, like Jacqueline said, cannot afford to pay the crazy expenses of medical school. So yeah, full disclosure, I have student loans. I actually ended up taking out the full amount, the maximum they allow you to do, which isn't necessarily something that I'd recommend, because now that I'm in the now that I'm a resident and I'm in the process of repaying the loans, now I have a higher sum to pay, which is not ideal. So I would say, instead of doing what I did and taking out the maximum, try to actually think about how much you really need and budget accordingly, so that you don't end up having to pay off your loans, because interest accrues and then you end up having to pay more for no reason. Something that I would also just add is that I went to a state medical school, and state medical schools are cheaper than other ones. That's not to say that if you get into Harvard or you get into Hopkins or wherever that you shouldn't go, but those schools are going to be more expensive than state schools. So, if there's equal caliber and one is a private school, one's a public school, probably a good idea from a financial perspective to choose the public one. I think that's all I have to add to that.
Yeah, I think we covered all the main points. I mean, most people take out loans for medical school. I mean, like, the private schools now are averaging at $50,000-$60,000 a year. Even if you have a partner that's making a good living, I mean, that's $250,000. So most people are not in a position to have that funded. If you do, great for you. But most people take out loans. And I do want to mention, I'd mentioned this on some other webinars or sessions, that every medical school is going to have a financial aid office where there will be a bunch of people sitting there employed, getting paid to help you with this aspect, getting you financially through medical school. So make friends with those people, ask them all your questions. And I will say, think about this and try to make a decision, but don't worry about this too much, because for most people, going to medical school ends up being a good financial decision, because doctors do have a pretty high earning potential. You know, how fast you want to pay back those loans and things like that are personal choices, but most people will eventually pay back their loans. And these are very good loans. They're not, you know, private bank loans, they're federal loans, and nobody could like harass you for them too much. Like, don't worry about this too much, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Okay. Are there any from female surgeons? Yes, there are, I promise you. I'm really interested in the field, and I've yet to meet a from female surgeon. Great, so we're gonna introduce you to some. Doctor, who are you up to first?
I think me, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
all right, just focus.
So yeah, you know, none of my close friends I would say are from female surgeons, but I do know of some people just through JOWMA, like Dr. Mira Hellman-Ostrov. She's a gynecologic oncologist, which is basically a surgeon. And then also Shani Fruchtner, she's a transplant surgeon. So people do it, you know, there's actually a separate group for JOWMA surgery. So if you're interested in surgery, we can definitely connect you with those people, and you can speak with them directly so that you could get a more detailed feel for what that's like.
Dr. Segelnik.
Yeah, I don't have so much to add. I will say that one of my favorite surgeons at my hospital is a JOWMA member. She's a from female surgeon, and she is a boss babe, okay? She is like the coolest person in the world. She's colorectal surgeon, and she's got 6 kids, and this was like, I wonder if she'll watch this one day. So I'm like, I don't want to talk her up too much. She already knows I'm obsessed with her. But it was like a second career for her. Like she already was like a midwife nurse, and then she went to med school, and then she went to surgery fellowship, and then she went to colorectal fellowship, and she's so cool. So you can be her one day.
Yeah, there are definitely from female surgeons at Sinai. I mean, I just know because she's also a colorectal surgeon, Dr. Sharon Zisman. She's a bunch of kids. I don't remember how many. But there are also a lot of surgical subspecialists at JOWMA. Ophthalmology is a surgical subspecialty. We have ENT. Do you have any urology at JOWMA? I mean, I know they exist. But, you know, aside for like the general surgery things, there are a lot of from female surgical subspecialists. You know, it's probably going to reflect, I mean, in general, like there are probably less surgeons around than just plain doctors. So, you know, that's going to be reflected definitely in the from population, but they're around, I promise you. And yes, let us know if you want to get onto that JOWMA surgeons chat. We'll get you on. Okay, how do you balance med school while working a full-time office job? You don't, is the simple answer.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't have anything else to add to that except that you don't work a full-time job. And I mean, there are some people that work a little bit, like they'll do, I know our school does, what's the word where you like sit in the library and then they pay you to do that, whatever. There's something where you can make a few bucks.
Like side gigs.
Yeah.
You know, you give a pocket of time, you spend some hours.
Yeah.
But no. Yeah, there's no way. I don't know if you both disagree. There's no way to have a full-time job during medical school. Medical school is your full-time plus job.
I guess I'll just add one thing to that. So a thing that people do is MD, MBA. So I heard about somebody who did their MBA. So I think they did it between their 3rd and their 4th year. And then they were working on Wall Street while simultaneously doing like really light medical school stuff, but I don't know this person very well, and I don't know enough about it. But as a general rule, like especially in the beginning of your medical education, you really need to be spending your bulk of your time studying. But as I said, the MD, MBA option does exist and people do it. So theoretically, and I don't know what those people ultimately want to do in the long term, like if they want to be on the business side of medicine, or if they just want to call themselves a doctor but mostly do business. But yeah, I don't know much about it, but just wanted you to be aware of it.
Yeah, I would also add that, like, it's not very financially advantageous to work at an office or most jobs while you're in medical school. Like, it's more to your advantage to just borrow that money in loans and pay it back later one day with your much you know, more generous salary as a doctor. Just from a financial perspective, it's not always, it's not worth it to work during medical school. Like, it's an investment, put your all into it, borrow the money, and you'll pay it back like the other 90% of medical students, you know, in the world, or in the US at least. Okay, next question. I'm just going to throw in there that I know we're over an hour. I want to try to at least get to all the questions that were submitted, and then if you guys want me the time, I'm happy to stick around to answer the questions in the chat. But I do want to try to get through all the questions that were submitted, so I'm going to prioritize that. Okay, would working night shifts in a hospital be a good idea for a mother so that she can be with her kids during the day, despite probably being exhausted? Yeah.
Okay, so it depends on the specialty that you do. There's actually a radiology attending who I know from Montefiore, who I saw last night. She's married to an orthopedic surgeon, so I think they're both pretty busy. But she has her career set up where she's just reading ED studies, and she works nights only, but she's on a few nights and then she's off. I don't know, how they break it up, but it's not like she's working every single night, or like she's working, for a full night. I mean, a full week of nights, and then the next week she's working the full week of nights. So she has, days off. So I think she spends time with her kids during the day, some days, and then she's working some nights. So, that setup works for her. I mean, it's not really something that I'd personally want to do, I don't think, but that's just on the radiology side of things. I think also if that's something that, one is interested in, like if you're in emergency medicine, you could theoretically do that, or like hospitalists, some of them like to really spend most of their time doing overnight shifts. So, you can do it. It's feasible, but I don't know that a lot of people prefer that.
Yeah, so I mean, definitely feasible. There's nocturnists, they just do nights. All of our peds hospitalists in our hospital, they do a mix of days and nights, so that, and then I've spoken to some, when they're on nights, they don't, it's basically them pulling a 24, because then they're up all day with their kid the next day. For me, like if sleep is very valuable, and I cannot function on no sleep. So that is something that I don't think I will ever do. Whereas I might just look for a regular outpatient 9 to 5 or nursing home job, or something that fits my lifestyle with having kids, where I'm not physically exhausted all the time.
Yeah. Thank you. I do want to add to what you're both saying, that from medical school and throughout residency and fellowship, you're not really going to have not much control over your schedule. Like, you're not going to really be given that choice. When you're a resident, your schedule is set for you. But yeah, once you're an attending, once you're done with your training, you have control and you can make those choices. There are people who work at night, but if the only reason you want to work at night is so that you can be with your kids during the day, then when are you ever going to sleep? I don't think that's like a sustainable lifestyle. It would definitely not be sustainable for me. I would say if you want to be around your kids, instead of thinking about working at night and being up all day with them, try to choose a specialty where it's easy to find, like a 9 to 5 job, where you're working just when your kids are at school, and something like that. I don't know. I don't think that being up all night and up all day with my kids, it would definitely not be sustainable for me. But like we mentioned before, there are a lot of specialties that are flexible. And this is something that you're going to look into and investigate. Definitely something I investigated. So Okay. I think this is our last question on the Google Doc. All right. Although each medical practice is different, are there allotted time breaks for physicians? Is it possible, for example, for a doctor to go to her child's sitter play or other events during work hours? Dr. Segelnik, I think you're up.
Right. So I think this is the same thing that we've kind of been saying. Every specialty is different. There are times where you can't leave. Like if you're in the OR, you can't really be like, okay, gotta go. Could you book cases around your kid sitter play? Sure. Can you block off your clinic schedule in the morning? Sure. You know, like it's very specialty dependent. It's very, you know, practice setting dependent as well. But again, it's doable, and that's something that once you reach attendinghood, which, you know, Jessica and I are almost there. These are things that we think about, and they're going to help us make our job choices. And then, you know, even your specialty choice, obviously picking what you love, like we said. If you're someone who loves a lot of things, then you can pick something that would allow you more to do that than others.
Thank you. We have completed the questions that were submitted. We have a bunch of questions in the chat, but we're at an hour and 20 minutes. So I only want to continue if there's sort of a unanimous okay with that. I don't want to overdo things. Dr. Segelnik, Dr. Goldman, are you able to stay? Do you have to go? How much more time do you have?
I can give you a few more. Oh, look, see,
okay.
somebody said federal work study. That's what it's called. When you sit in the library for a couple hours and they pay you for it.
Oh, okay.
There's only two. I only see 2 questions in the chat.
Oh, I have a bunch of DMs. Are people okay with me reading them out loud but not saying your name? Is everybody okay with that? Like I could say your question without saying your name, because if you're asking this question, in my teaching experience, I've learned there are probably 5 other people in the audience with the exact same question. So is everyone okay with that? Just give us thumbs up or something. You know, can I read your questions without saying your name? Okay, great. So I'm going to go through these questions, try to do this quickly so we can wrap up. Dr. Segelnik, when you have to go, no problem. Okay. Can you talk about the finances of having a child in medical school, approximately how much a year? PM me on the chat. I don't know if this is something I want to like broadcast. Where I live, it's really expensive. Actually, something that my husband and I were so clueless about, and I wonder if we would have made some different decisions. This is something that's going to vary tremendously from place to place. So PM me and I can give you like numbers.
Yeah, and for me, I have a live-in nanny. The way that I make it a little bit more cost effective is that I share her with another family. So she gets paid, you know, like $550, and then we split that, not 100% evenly because she lives with me. So I pay a little bit more, and they're only using her from like 8 to 4. While she works technically 7 to 7, but she's always in the house. Plus she does light housekeeping, laundry, stuff like that. So that makes it a little bit more affordable for me.
And I think kids, so I don't have anything to add to that.
They're expensive. Just okay. Next question. What is a clerkship? Is that the different specialty rotations? So in your 3rd year, you have like, for example, a month of pediatrics, a month of surgery, a month of medicine, et cetera, et cetera. So those are clerkships. But the idea of a clerkship is that like you're there in person, like a job, but you also have to study for an exam. That's why, like, you know, we fuss about it a lot. It's hard. Anything to add?
No.
Okay, great. Have you ever needed to reschedule a test because of Shabbos, Yom Tov, and how accommodating was your school? I never had an issue because Sinai has inside their student policy that, you know, a religiously observed holiday, not like Chol Hamoed, Purim, and Hanukkah, not that type of stuff, but a real like holiday is officially excused. Like it's in their policy book. So I never had an issue with this ever. Anything to add?
No, I never had an issue. I've had to do it multiple times because I just don't understand why NYT couldn't just look what time Rosh Hashanah fell out every year, but they would always schedule some exam on either Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur or Sukkot. So I did have to do it, but they were always accommodating. And I wasn't alone. Like I said, there was about 9 or 10 of us.
So the only thing I would have to add is just that I never had any issues in my medical school. I don't know if they actually had anything formally in their policy book. It's been a while. I graduated in 2017, but never had any issues. Nothing was ever scheduled on the holidays, so they may or may not have taken that into consideration when scheduling exams. I don't know.
Yeah, so Sinai, while not religious, they do have Jewish roots. So like Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur was always either a day off or like absolutely 100% excused if you were you know Jewish or whatever reason. So this is something that's going to depend on what school you're in. I wouldn't worry about this too much though. Like it shouldn't occupy, I don't think, that much of your brain space. Like you'll make it work. It'll be fine. Next question. Do you take notes during class in medical school, like in class to college, or is it different? My answer is no, I don't take notes. Yeah, it's very different because of the volume of information you're thrown out. The standard study methods that you have probably done in high school and college are not going to work here. And the faster you figure out what works for you, the better. But I wouldn't worry about this unless you're like already accepted to medical school, starting to think about it. Like if you're still an undergrad, don't worry about it. Just do well in your undergrad studies. You'll get to medical. You'll worry about medical school when you're there. Anything bad?
I have a different answer. I did take notes in medical school.
Okay.
Primarily, I feel like whenever I'm listening to a lecture, in order for me to not be tempted to check my phone, I need to keep myself preoccupied. So like taking notes helps me pay attention, but everyone's different. But yeah, I'm big on note taking.
I took notes too. They gave us the PowerPoints ahead of time. In the beginning, I took handwritten notes and I realized that was not going to work because they shoot at you 1,000 words in 1 minute. So I switched over to typing, and that's what I used to go over the material, when I was studying for my exams.
So I probably in my entire medical school, I have maybe like 20 papers of notes that I took over 4 years. I think I threw them out the other day. Like my method was I would listen to lectures. I starting from my first pregnancy, I never went to a class that wasn't mandatory. So classes assigned are not mandatory. They're all recorded. So I would wait for them to be recorded. I would listen to them on like double speed. Occasionally take notes and then do questions, flashcards, and review PowerPoints and like reviews. This is, every person is different. That was how I studied. How do you mother in residency? Is it drastically different than med school? I can't answer this question yet because I didn't start residency yet.
So I guess that's me,
Yep.
since I'm the one with the baby in residency. Yeah, it's different. It's definitely harder. Like we were talking about before, you don't get to really pick your schedule. If you're on a night shift, if you're on a 24, if you're on weekend call, that's that. So you have to, again, be creative. For us, it's a live-in nanny. My husband's non-medical and he works 8 to 4:30. And then still, like when I am home, I still read her a book at, 2.5 years later, we're still doing that. And days where I miss bedtime, we FaceTime, we make it work. And I would say that, just to add, even though this wasn't asked, pregnancy in med school versus pregnancy in residency, also way harder. I definitely was
Harder in med school?
No, harder in residency.
Oh.
I was not prepared how much harder it would be as a resident. I'm just so much more tired. Plus you're tired creating a life inside you. Plus I had hyperemesis, so I ended up in the emergency room needing fluids. Thank God my program like this, I purposely picked a program that is family friendly and supportive. You know, if I need to take half a day off, I can take half a day off and not have to worry about making up. There are things where you really, it's very hard because your schedule affects everybody else's schedule when you're a resident. But so far they've been good to me. And that's what I have to say.
Great. We're almost through everything. If anyone has to go, feel free. I know we're like way over time. Do people really spend 10 to 15 years paying off loans? Yeah, some people spend more. Please don't worry about this too much. The fact that people are spending 10 to 15 years paying it off and in the meantime living nice lives as doctors should tell you that I think it's all going to work out. I wouldn't worry about this part too much. It's up to you though. Some people pay them off in like 3-4 years. You know, it's going to be up to you. Yeah, but blank, I won't say her name, female surgeon is rarely ever home. I'm always babysitting her kids. Is surgery really good specialty for firm women? If you're looking at someone who's doing this and you're not happy with their lifestyle, so pick something else. I mean, like it's your life to live. I will not give you any answers.
Right. I'm just going to add to the loans thing.
Mhm.
The way, so I was a very nervous med student about it. I was like, oh my God, I have so many loans, blah, blah, blah. And I'll be transparent. I have over $300,000 loaned, like whatever. At this point in my life, speaking to many attendings, first of all, no doctor you know is like house poor, can't afford a house, can't afford a car, can't afford to send their kids to yeshiva if they want to. So you'll be fine. And they all have loans. And they just say it's like just how you pay your mortgage, just how you pay your rent. You're just paying another bill. If you want to set it up like that, that's fine. Also, there are different options when you look at it, and you could do student loan forgiveness. Again, this would have to be a whole lecture in itself.
Yeah, we would need a whole series for this.
So there are ways to forgive your loans. There are ways, then you have to weigh if getting a higher paying job for not working for a nonprofit is worth it, So I would not worry about it. Like, you're going to do it and you're going to figure out which way works for you. Are you going to like refinance and then pay it off in 3 years? Or are you going to sit down, relax, and pay it off in 20 years and it's just another bill? So.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly add to that too. It's not really something that I'm actually very stressed out about at the moment. Like, I think before I had to start paying off the loans, I was more stressed out about them. But like Jacqueline said, it's just another bill, like just another payment. So it's actually really not so bad. And then also, just keep in mind, like, most doctors make a good living. And, if you, even though $300,000 of loans sounds like a lot of money, if you compare that to annual salary, I mean, yes, everybody has living expenses, you make that money back, in a matter of years after you're out of residency. So, I think it's not something that should deter anybody from choosing a career in medicine if that's what you're passionate about. Like, the cost of it shouldn't prohibit you from going for it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, 2 more questions. Do you ever feel like you ask others too many favors or ask too much of your support system? Okay, I'm going to bite this one. No. So, I mean, the support will look different for everyone, but for me, for example, and for a lot of, so like my main support is like my husband, for example, but my husband is a stakeholder in my whole medical training, right? Like, he's somebody who benefits from it, somebody who, he's happy that I'm, fulfilling this life dream. So it's not like I'm asking him for a favor. It's like we're building this together. And then, the rest of it, like getting help from family. So first, family usually wants to help you, and, it's a two-sided street, right? I'm asking for help, but like, next year, they're going to ask me for help. So no. And then, with paid help, like, you're paying them. So, I guess that's my, what I have to say about that.
Yeah, and I concur with what Efrat said. you can ask for help and you should ask for help and you shouldn't decline help when offered. It's just, you don't have to be like a superhero. You should accept help because you have a million things to do. And it's like any sort of weight that can be lifted off your shoulder, like just let it be. My mother-in-law helps me out. She places orders for food for me sometimes. Sometimes I get takeout. Yes, I know that sounds like a crime, but it's really fun.
Yeah, I agree. I think again, this goes back to like you just having this feeling of feeling guilty, but just you have to learn to like let that go. Same with like the mom guilt or wife guilt, or like all these people, they're your support system because they care about you and they want you to succeed. So like I purposely like only wanted to stay on Long Island because we live 5 minutes away from my parents. We live 20 minutes away from Neil's parents. Like we are setting ourselves up for success because I have free babysitting if I need it. My mom cooks me Shabbos meals like every week. So what am I gonna say no? And I don't feel guilty ever about it because they offer. So I say yes,
Yeah, I mean, life is a circle. So maybe they're helping you now, but there'll come a point in time when you might be helping them. I will add also that, every medical school should have like at Sinai, they call it, Office of Student Affairs, right? Or I don't know, they have other titles, but basically like these are the people you go to when you find out you're pregnant and you have to shuffle your schedule or you want to talk to them about it. And I know that I had a little bit of guilt initially until it finally dawned on me that, this person with this title literally gets a salary to do this. Okay, that they're getting a paycheck to come and meet with students. Like it's not like a favor or something. They're not being nice to you. Like it's their job. So you really should have zero guilt. And you're paying a lot of tuition, and that's where your tuition money is going. So you really should not have. You should have zero guilt about going to whoever it is in your school, discussing these things with them, having meetings with them. I mean, this is their job, and your tuition is literally paying their paycheck. So you should not feel guilty about that. I do want to throw in something that I feel like I wanted to say before, and I totally forgot. When it came to when we were discussing like studying smarter, I think I wanted to mention that, at least for me, part of like succeeding and doing well in medical school was like getting the right rest, which sometimes seems almost frivolous. I know this is like so embarrassing, but I finished like the whole Game of Thrones while studying for step 2. And at the time it felt so frivolous. And then I realized that like for every 4 or 5 hours of studying I do, I need like an hour of like brain cleaning. Like my brain just needs to air out, or like I just don't handle the amount of information. So some things that might seem frivolous, actually, I'm telling you, Game of Thrones got me through, my board exam. So just throwing it out there that you also have to focus on the rest and like how you recharge.
Yeah,
I know that was like a non sequitur, but
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to add to that I completely agree. Sleep is so important. And I remember like in the beginning of medical school, I would say, okay, I want to get through X number of lectures a day. And then it was like getting, maybe late, like 10, 30, 11 o'clock, and I'm starting to feel tired. Like, don't ignore your body's cues. Like if you feel tired and you're at the point where you're not going to process anything, it's probably not a good idea to keep going. Just let yourself go to bed. It's okay that you didn't get through everything that you thought you wanted to get through. Just, you need sleep. You need to be rested to actually process what you're studying. So if you study things and you're tired, you're going to get nothing out of it. All you're going to do is lose sleep, and then it's going to be a vicious cycle.
And on a topic I'm going to add, I know we're like running really late, that I learned the hard way that your mind does not process long-term memory if you're sleep deprived. So I had a bit of a problem studying for my first board exam because I felt like everything I learned that first year when I had a really small baby that wasn't sleeping through the night was wiped out of my brain. Like I took all my exams and I passed everything and I did fine. And then like months later, like it just wasn't in my brain. And Sinai has a learning specialist, an amazing person. Her name is Lauren Lankowski. who had to tell me this. I mean, I should have known that if you're very sleep deprived, there's no way for your brain to successfully store long-term memories. So I would say don't scrimp on sleep. Just little, throwing it out there. Okay, this is our last question. How do you find out what a med school or residency program's culture is regarding having a family? You ask people who are there, like students who are there, Anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I agree with that point. It's going to be hard. Like if you ask a program at an interview, they may be transparent with you. They may not be, like say you ask an interviewer, the program director, whatever it is. Yeah, I think it's better to just ask people that go there. If you have that luxury of knowing someone that's there, it's the best way to get an answer.
And like, don't ask them in like a group setting where everybody's looking and watching. You want to really get people one-on-one, so that there's nothing to lose by telling you the honest truth. So,
I just see one more question in the everyone chat. I don't know if we.
Yeah, the lectures teach the information. I saw that one too.
The what? Which one?
That did the lecture? You could read it, Jessica.
Okay. Oh, go ahead. You can go. Go ahead, read it.
Sure. Did the lectures teach you the information adequately, or did you feel you had to teach yourself the info? Okay, I'll answer. I felt like my lectures were really good for the most part, and that my lectures did teach me the information adequately. I felt that when I was studying for step 1, which I think is the first time in medical school where you're taking an exam that everybody's expected to take, I didn't think that I was seeing all this new information and I don't know where it's coming from. So I felt that my lectures were on point. I think that'll vary by medical school, but however they structure their curriculum. Ideally a medical school should structure a curriculum so that it's high yield and that what you're learning is going to be the material that they're going to be testing on these standardized exams, but really just depends on the school. My own personal experience was good.
For me, it was teacher dependent. Some are just better lecturers than others, where I did and I know for me, like the neuroanatomy and neuro block, the professor who taught it he was just all over the place, could not understand one thing. I had to go and watch videos and teach it myself. But then pathology, pharmacology, all those, they were like pathology, excellent. So for me, it was teacher dependent, and I think that's kind of mostly where you go. Like, I don't know if anyone's 100% on point all the time.
Yeah, I feel like my experience was mostly good, but it's never going to be perfect. But since I'm not someone who relied on the lecture that much anyway, I don't know how much of a difference it made, but this is going to be school dependent, and even in good schools, it's not going to be perfect. But yeah, I would say at Sinai, depending, some courses were excellent, some a little less. I think we're done. Wow, that was almost 2 hours. I can't believe it. I hope everybody was okay sitting through this. If you have more questions, you can always flood our chat. It's really easy to answer questions on the chat. Dr. Segelnik and Dr. Goldman, are you on the Premed chat?
I don't think I am, but I'm happy to.
Do you want to join?
Part of it, yeah, sure, I'd love to.
Yeah, it's not as volatile, volatilely, that's not a word. Okay, it's not as super duper active as the regular JOWMA chat, so it won't make as much noise in your life. But I think it's a great, people have great questions, and the more people answer, I think the better, the more perspectives. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Segelnik and Dr. Goldman. Your answers were amazing. I learned so much from some of these answers that you gave us. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Hope to see you, of course. Yeah, so thanks everyone, and we'll see you on the chat.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Thank you so much.